My sister fainted when she saw me walk into the OR. That's the first thing I remember from that morning. Not the smell of antiseptic. Not the squeak of my shoes on the polished floor. Not even the sound of the monitor beeping somewhere down the hall. Just the look on her face right before her knees gave out. The scrub tech caught her by the elbow. Someone said her name. But I kept walking because I had a patient on the table, and patients don't wait for family drama to resolve itself. My brother-in-law was the one who needed surgery, and I was the attending surgeon on call. But to understand how we got to that operating room, you have to go back about 9 years. Back to a kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, where a 19-year-old girl told her parents she wanted to go to medical school, and the room went very quiet. I grew up in a 2-story house on Elmwood Drive. My father, Raymond, worked for the county roads department for over 30 years. He left every morning in a reflective vest with a thermos of gas station coffee. My mother, Harriet, did bookkeeping part-time for a hardware store and kept the household running with the kind of quiet efficiency that nobody notices until it disappears. We weren't wealthy, we weren't struggling either. We were the kind of family that paid their bills on time and didn't talk about money at the dinner table. My sister Dana was 4 years older than me. And from the time I was old enough to understand what that meant, I understood that Dana was the one people noticed. She was warm in a way that filled a room, funny without trying. She had a gift for making everyone feel like the most important person in the conversation. Teachers adored her. Our parents lit up when she walked in. When she married Marcus at 24, the whole extended family came out for the wedding and called it the happiest day they'd seen in years. I was different. I wasn't cold, but I was quieter, more interested in how things worked than in what people thought of me. While Dana was out at bridal showers and neighborhood cookouts, I was in my room reading anatomy textbooks I'd borrowed from the library. I ran cross-country. I tutored kids in chemistry for $8 an hour. I applied to 12 colleges and got into 4, including the one with the pre-med program I actually wanted. The night I told my parents, we were eating spaghetti. My mother had the good plates out because it was a Tuesday, and she did that sometimes, just to make ordinary nights feel a little special. I told them I wanted to be a surgeon. My mother set down her fork. My father looked at me the way people look at lottery tickets, like the idea had potential, but he wasn't holding his breath. It's a long road, he said carefully. Medical school, residency. You're looking at 12, 13 years before you're really practicing. I know, I said. I've looked into it. Dana, who was home visiting that weekend, leaned back in her chair. You sure? She said. You know what surgeons are like. All that pressure. It's not for everyone. I know what surgeons are like, I said. She smiled the way she always did. Not meanly, just lightly, like she wasn't quite taking the conversation seriously. My father nodded slowly. If that's the path you want, he said, you see it through. Don't start something you're going to walk away from. I didn't know then how much that sentence would echo. I left for college 2 months later, and everything was fine until it wasn't. About a year into my pre-med program, the phone calls started getting shorter. I figured it was the distance, the adjustment. My parents were busy. I was busy. That's how it goes. Then I called home one Sunday evening, and my mother answered on the first ring, which she never did. Her voice was strange, careful. Mom, I said, you okay? There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Your sister said you've been having a hard time, she said. I remember standing in the dorm hallway, turning slightly away from a group of people passing by. What do you mean? She said you failed your midterms. That you've been thinking about switching majors. I had not failed anything. I had a 3.7 GPA and a research position in the biology department. Mom, I said slowly, that's not true. She went quiet. Then, Dana said she talked to your advisor. My advisor had never met Dana in her life. I tried to explain. My mother listened, but there was something in her silence that scared me. That particular kind of quiet that means a person has already made up their mind and is just waiting for you to stop talking. A few weeks later, I drove 6 hours home during a long weekend to explain in person. I brought my transcript, my acceptance letters, my research position letter. I laid them out on the kitchen table. My father looked at the papers. Then he looked at Dana, who was sitting across from me with her coffee cup, calm as a Sunday morning. She said gently, "I'm just worried about you. You don't have to prove anything to us. Those papers are proof," I said. "I'm doing well. I'm not switching majors. Nothing she told you is true." Dana's expression shifted just slightly, not guilty, just wounded looking. Like I was the one being unreasonable. My father pushed the papers back toward me. "We're not trying to interrogate you," he said. "Then believe what I'm showing you." My mother put her hand on my arm. "We just don't want you to burn out." I took the papers. I drove 6 hours back, and something settled in my chest that night, something hard and cold, that I tried for a long time to pretend wasn't there. Over the next 2 years, the distance between us grew into something formal. Phone calls on holidays, short texts, a birthday card with a gift card inside. I kept trying. I sent my dean's list letters. I mailed a photo of myself at my white coat ceremony, the moment first-year med students officially begin. No one came. I understood. It was a long drive. People were busy. But there was no card, no call, just a text from my mother 3 days later that said, "Saw the picture. Looks cold there. Hope you're eating enough." I stood in my apartment in my white coat, holding my phone, reading that text 4 times. I thought about calling Dana, asking her directly what she'd said and why, but every time I picked up the phone, I thought about her sitting at that kitchen table, calm and quiet, and I put the phone back down. Some conversations won't go anywhere before you even start them. So I did what I do when life gets difficult. I worked. Medical school is its own kind of survival. You learn to compartmentalize. You learn to walk into a room carrying whatever you're carrying and set it down somewhere invisible so you can actually be present for the person in front of you. That skill, which the job demands, turned out to be the same skill I needed to keep living while my family stayed silent. During my 2nd year of residency in general surgery, I met someone. His name was Ethan. No, wait, I can't use that name. His name was Joel. Joel Carmichael. He was a hospitalist, which meant he managed patients who'd been admitted but didn't need a specialist yet. He was the kind of person who remembered the names of every night shift nurse on the floor and asked how their weekends were. Not performatively, just genuinely. The first time I noticed him, he was sitting with an elderly patient who had no family there, just talking to her, not about her chart, just talking. I didn't fall quickly. I didn't have time to fall quickly. But somewhere between the overnight shifts and the bad cafeteria coffee and the quiet moments between emergencies, I fell. We dated for 2 years before we got engaged. When he proposed, we were at a state park in eastern Tennessee on a weekend we'd been planning for 4 months. It was not fancy. He did not rent out a restaurant or arrange skywriting. He just pulled a ring out of his jacket pocket while we were eating sandwiches on a rock overlooking the gorge, and he said, "I want to build something real with you." That's all. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I sent an invitation to my parents. A real one, in an envelope with a stamp, the way my mother always said invitations should be sent. I included a handwritten note. I gave them 9 months' notice. Dana called me 2 days after they received it. She said she wasn't sure they could make it. Dad's back had been acting up. Mom didn't do well with travel anymore. It was a lot to ask, she said. A long drive. A lot of planning. I said I understood. She said, "I'm sure you'll have a beautiful day." The wedding was in a garden venue outside Nashville. Joel's family came from Michigan. A handful of my med school friends flew in. My colleagues from the hospital showed up in force because hospital people understand showing up. The ceremony was in the late afternoon, and the light came through the trees exactly the way I'd hoped it would. My family was not there. I looked at the empty chairs on my side for exactly 1 moment. Then Joel squeezed my hand, and I looked at him instead, and the ceremony began. We didn't have a honeymoon right away. I was 3 weeks from the end of a rotation. We took a long weekend in the Smoky Mountains and promised ourselves we'd do something bigger when the schedule allowed. 18 months later, our son was born. We named him Charlie. He had Joel's nose and my stubbornness and the most inconvenient sleeping schedule I have ever encountered, including surgical residencies. I sent a birth announcement to Elmwood Drive. A card, a photo, the whole thing. No response. I waited 4 weeks. Then I called. My mother answered. Her voice was the same careful, measured thing it had been for years by then. "Did you get the announcement?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "He's beautiful." "Thank you," I said. Pause. "Why didn't you call?" A longer pause. "Your sister said you'd been struggling since the birth, that you didn't want visitors." I had not said that to anyone. I had not struggled in any way that I shared with Dana because Dana and I had not had a real conversation in nearly 3 years. "That's not true," I said. Silence. "Mom, I need you to hear me. I have never, not once, told Dana anything that she has reported to you about me. Not about my grades, not about my wedding, not about my son. Whatever she's been saying, it didn't come from me." My mother's voice went very soft. She wouldn't make things up. There it was. The same sentence from a different year. I held the phone against my cheek for a moment. Then I said, very calmly, "I'm going to keep sending you pictures of Charlie. I'm not going to stop. But I need you to know that the person telling you my life isn't someone who has access to it." I hung up. I sat in the rocking chair in the nursery with Charlie asleep on my chest, and I stayed very still for a long time. Over the next 4 years, I became a very good surgeon. Not because of anything dramatic. No single save that changed everything. No movie moment. Just the accumulation of days. Shelling up. Staying calm. Making the correct call when the margin for error was a millimeter. My attending told me after my boards that I had the kind of judgment that took most surgeons a decade to develop. I thanked him. I went home, fed Charlie dinner, read him 2 books, and thought about calling my parents to tell them. I didn't. I did keep sending pictures. Birthday photos, Christmas photos. A video of Charlie's first steps. Unopened, as far as I knew. But I sent them. Then, on a Wednesday morning in November, I was finishing a consultation when my charge nurse flagged me in the hallway. "There's an emergency admission," she said. "Subdural hematoma. Came in through the ER." The attending on call asked if you could scrub in. "It's a tricky location." I pulled up the chart on my tablet while I was walking. 39-year-old male. Head trauma from a car accident. Blood pooling between the skull and the brain, and the location made standard approaches complicated. I scrolled to the patient's name to see if I'd treated him before. Marcus Holloway. I stopped walking. Marcus. My brother-in-law. Dana's husband. I stood in that hallway for probably 4 seconds, which is a long time to stand still when someone needs surgery. Then I kept moving, because that's what you do. I asked the charge nurse to get the ethics officer on the phone and page my supervising attending. I needed someone to know about the relationship before I scrubbed in, not after. In surgery, perception matters. You don't make judgment calls in secret, especially when family is involved. My supervising attending, a dry, efficient woman named Dr. Vasquez, listened to the whole thing without expression. Then she said, "Do you feel you can perform objectively?" "Yes," I said. "Do you want someone to take over?" I thought about that. Marcus was Joel's family now too, in a complicated way, but more than that, Marcus was a person with a brain bleed, and I was the most qualified surgeon in the building for this particular case. "No," I said. "I can do this." She nodded. "I'll observe. If I see hesitation, I'll pull you. Understood?" Understood. I was gloving up at the sink when the OR doors opened and Dana rushed in. She must have driven faster than I'd ever seen her drive. She was still in her coat, her hair wind-tangled. She was talking to a nurse, saying she needed to see her husband, that she was the emergency contact. And then she saw me. I was in scrubs, my mask around my neck, my hands raised and wet from the scrub. I looked at her. She looked at me. Her knees buckled. The scrub tech caught her. Someone said her name. I turned back to the sink, finished the scrub, and walked through the doors. The surgery took 4 hours. There were 2 moments where the margin was thin enough that I could hear my own breathing. But the bleed was controlled. Marcus came through. When I walked out of the OR, Dana was in the surgical waiting room. She was sitting in one of those beige chairs with a paper coffee cup held in both hands, staring at the floor. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. "He's stable," I said. "We were able to control the bleed. He'll be in ICU for observation, but the surgery went well." She exhaled like she'd been holding air in her lungs for hours. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. "A nurse will come get you when he's settled." I turned to go. She said, "Wait." I stopped. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How are you here? You're moved to Nashville." "I did residency in Nashville," I said. "I've been at this hospital for 3 years." She stared at me. "Did Mom and Dad know?" she asked. "I don't know what they know," I said. "I haven't talked to them much." Her face changed. Something shifted in it that I'd never seen before, something that looked like the beginning of understanding arriving somewhere it had been kept out for a long time. I went home that evening. Joel had Charlie at the kitchen table doing a puzzle. Charlie jumped up when I came in, which he always did because he is 7 and has not yet learned to play it cool. I held him for a minute with my coat still on, which is not something I usually do. Joel looked at me over the top of Charlie's head. "Hard day?" he asked. "You could say that," I said. We talked after Charlie was in bed. I told him everything: the chart, Dana in the OR, the surgery, the waiting room. He listened the way he always does, like he's making sure he has the full picture before he says anything. Then he said, "What do you want to happen now?" I didn't know yet. I honestly didn't know. 3 days later, Dana called my cell phone. I had not given her the number. She must have gotten it from the hospital directory. She said, "Marcus is doing well. The doctors say he might be home by the weekend." I said I was glad. She was quiet for a moment. "Then I want to talk, if that's something you're open to." I thought about saying no. The version of me from 5 years ago, sitting in that nursery with Charlie asleep on my chest, wanted to say no. But I had spent 9 years being a surgeon, and one thing surgery teaches you is that avoidance doesn't heal anything. It just postpones the damage. I said, "I'm free Thursday afternoon." We met at a coffee shop near the hospital. Dana came in looking thinner than I remembered, which surprised me. She ordered tea and held the mug the same way she'd held the coffee cup in the waiting room. We were quiet for a minute before she spoke. "I want to understand," I said first. "Not forgive, not reconcile. Understand. Start there." She nodded. "The first year of your pre-med program," she said. "I told Mom you were struggling." She paused. "You weren't. I knew you weren't. I waited." She looked at her mug. "Marcus and I had just bought the house. We were stretched so thin. And every conversation with Mom was about how incredible you were doing." She'd light up. She'd read your emails out loud. She stopped. Then started again, more quietly. "I told her once that I was worried about you. That I'd heard the pressure was intense." She was so concerned, so immediately worried, that I kept going. It got her attention. I sat with that. "It wasn't planned," she said. "I didn't sit down and decide to ruin things for you. It just grew. Like a lie does," I said. She closed her eyes. "Yes." I looked at my coffee. "Why my wedding? Why Charlie?" Her voice got smaller. "Because by then I'd said so many things," she said. "And I didn't know how to unsay them. Every time I thought about telling the truth, I thought about what it would mean. That they'd know I'd been lying for years. So you kept lying." She didn't answer. I thought about the kitchen table with my transcript spread out and Dana sitting across from me perfectly calm. I thought about the white coat photo and the text about weather. I thought about Charlie's birth announcement and the 4 weeks of silence. "You know what the hardest part was," I said. She looked up. "It wasn't the wedding. It wasn't even the 9 years. It was the Christmas cards." She blinked. "What Christmas cards?" "I've been sending them every year," I said. "To Mom and Dad. To let them know I was still there." She shook her head slowly. "I didn't know that." I believed her. Some things you can tell. 2 weeks later, Dana drove our parents to Nashville. She told me later that the conversation in the car took most of the 4-hour drive. I don't know exactly what was said. I only know that when the three of them walked up to our front door, my father's eyes were red at the edges in the way of someone who has been crying and is trying not to show it. Joel answered the door. Joel, who is the best person I know, shook my father's hand and said it was good to finally meet him, and meant it. Charlie came barreling around the corner in his socks and nearly took out a lamp. "Is that them?" he said loudly. "The grandparents?" "Yes," I said. He assessed them for a moment, with the full seriousness of a 7-year-old. "Hi," he said. "Do you want to see my Lego collection? It's pretty impressive." My mother laughed. It came out of her like something that had been held in too long, a little too loud, a little shaky at the edges. She crouched down to Charlie's level. "I would love to," she said. My father stood in my doorway and looked around my house. The framed diplomas on the wall. The growth chart penciled on the kitchen door frame where we tracked Charlie. The Surgical Society award Joel had insisted on framing even though I'd wanted to leave it in the box. He turned to look at me. "You did all of this," he said. "I have a lot of help," I said. "But yes." He exhaled slowly. His voice was lower than I remembered. Rougher somehow. "I should have called the hospital," he said, "years ago. The first time I had a doubt, I should have picked up the phone and called." "Yes," I said gently. "You should have." He looked at the diplomas again. "Pride can make a person stupid," he said quietly. I knew something felt off, and I told myself it was fine. I thought about how many years that sentence accounted for. 9 of them, give or take. But I also thought about the fact that he was standing in my doorway at 71 years old, saying it out loud. "That's not nothing." Dana called later that evening after our parents had driven back to Dayton. She asked how it had gone. "It was a start," I said. She was quiet. Then, "I know there's nothing I can say that covers 9 years." "No," I said. "There isn't." She didn't try to argue with that. There's a thing that happens in surgery when a patient has been bleeding slowly for a long time. The damage isn't always visible from the outside. You go in thinking it's one thing, and you find the actual problem somewhere else entirely. And sometimes what looks like the source of the wound isn't the origin at all. It's just the place the blood pooled. Dana was where the blood pooled. My parents' silence was the damage. The origin, I think, was something older and quieter. The ordinary human ache of watching someone you love get the kind of attention you wanted and not knowing what to do with that feeling. I'm not saying that to excuse anything. I'm saying it because understanding a wound doesn't mean approving of it. It just means you can treat it accurately. My parents started visiting every couple of months. The first few times were careful and formal in the way of people relearning how to be in the same room. My mother brought banana bread because she didn't know what else to bring. My father helped Joel recock the bathtub, which nobody asked him to do, but which was very much needed. Slowly, the visits got easier. Charlie started calling them by the grandparent names he made up himself, because he is 7 and has opinions about nomenclature. My mother pretended to be offended and has used her name with absolute delight ever since. Marcus recovered fully. Dana and I have lunch occasionally near the hospital at a place that has good soup. We're not close the way sisters sometimes are. We probably won't be, but we're honest with each other now, which is more than we were. One afternoon, my father and Charlie were outside on the back porch. Charlie was explaining something about a book he'd read with his characteristic lack of interest in being brief, and my father was listening like it was the most important information he'd received all week. I watched them through the kitchen window for a while. Joel came and stood beside me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He looked where I was looking. "That's a good thing to watch," he said. "It is," I agreed. Later that evening, after dinner, my father found me in the kitchen cleaning up. He stood in the doorway for a moment, which he does when he's thinking something through. "I used to tell people my daughter was a doctor," he said. I looked at him. "Even when you thought I dropped out?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Old habit, I guess." He looked at the floor. I just stopped saying what kind. I thought about that version of my father, telling people his daughter was a doctor, without knowing if it was still true. Holding on to the idea of me because he couldn't bring himself to ask the question that might make it false. "Pride is complicated," he said. "It really is," I said. He helped me finish the dishes. He didn't say anything else, and he didn't need to. Some things are easier to understand when your hands are busy. I got promoted to attending surgeon last spring. The department head mentioned my name at the board meeting. There was a small reception afterward, the kind with bad cheese cubes and decent wine. My parents came. My mother wore the blue dress she wears to things she considers important. My father sat in the front row like he was at a graduation. When my name was announced, he stood up and he started clapping before anyone else did. I looked at him from across the room. He caught my eye and nodded once, the way my grandfather used to nod when something was understood between them. Later, when the reception was winding down and most people had left, I stood by the window for a few minutes by myself. The evening sky outside had gone that particular shade of navy blue. It gets right before dark. I thought about the girl who sat at a dinner table in Dayton at 19 and said she wanted to be a surgeon. I thought about everything that sentence cost her, and everything it eventually gave her. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about the 9 years. The honest answer is that I stopped carrying that particular weight somewhere around year 6. Not because it wasn't real, but because I needed my hands free for everything else. What I carried instead was simpler. Just the work. Just showing up. Just finishing what I started. My father said that to me once. If you're going to do it, see it through. He meant the medical program, but it turned out to apply to almost everything else. The truth, eventually, has a way of being seen. Not always on your timeline. Not always in the way you imagined. Sometimes it walks into an operating room while the person who never believed in you is standing on the other side of the glass. Sometimes it just sits quietly in a chart and waits for someone to open it. You don't have to fight for it every day. You just have to stay. If tonight you're in the middle of something hard, if someone in your life has closed a door that should have stayed open, I want you to hear this from someone who's been on the other side of that door for a long time. The truth doesn't expire. It just waits. Keep going. Ask one more question. Listen for a little longer. And if any part of this story felt familiar, stay with me. There's more to come. I've thought a lot about what actually broke my family apart. And the honest answer is that it wasn't Dana. Not entirely. Dana lied, yes. She told my parents I was failing when I wasn't. She kept going long after the first time, patching one story onto another the way you patch a wall you're afraid to tear open. That part is true, and I'm not going to soften it. But my parents had a choice every single time. My father could have called my university. My mother could have asked me directly instead of going quiet on the phone. The information was never hidden. I was on the dean's list. I had a research position. I mailed them my white coat photo. I sent Charlie's birth announcement with a return address on it. The truth was sitting right there, and they chose not to pick it up, because picking it up would have meant admitting they'd already believed something wrong. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. The lie didn't survive because Dana was convincing. It survived because questioning it felt more uncomfortable than carrying it. And that's a choice too, even when it doesn't feel like one. I'm not angry at my parents anymore. I got to a place, somewhere around year 6, where I realized that anger was costing me more than the situation deserved. What I replaced it with wasn't forgiveness exactly, not the clean, resolved kind you see in movies. It was more like clarity. I understood what happened. I understood why happened. I understood why. And I decided I could live with that understanding without needing anyone to suffer for it. What I do feel when I think about those 9 years is something closer to grief. Grief for the version of my father who could have been at my white coat ceremony. Grief for the version of my mother who could have held Charlie the week he was born, instead of 9 years later. That time is gone. No conversation in a hallway, no visit with banana bread, no afternoon watching my father listen to my son talk about Legos. None of it gives those years back. But I've learned something about loss that surgery actually taught me. You don't heal by recovering everything you lost. You heal by rebuilding function with what remains. The question is never, can we go back? The question is, what can we build from here? Dana and I have lunch sometimes. It's not warm in the way sisters can be warm, but it's honest. And honest is more valuable to me now than comfortable. She said something once over soup that I keep coming back to. She said, I didn't know the lie had a ceiling. I thought it would just stay small. That's the thing about dishonesty. It doesn't stay anywhere. It spreads into the spaces around it quietly until one day it has taken up rooms you didn't know it had entered. The only ceiling it ever finds is the truth, which doesn't expire, doesn't negotiate, and doesn't need your permission to eventually show up. My father said pride can make a person stupid. He meant himself. But I think it applies to all of us in different directions. My pride kept me from going home more than once to fight for my name. My mother's pride kept her from asking a question she was afraid might embarrass her. My father's pride kept him from picking up a phone. Dana's pride kept her from correcting a story that had grown too big to carry alone. None of us were operating from cruelty. We were all operating from fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being less, fear of the cost of honesty. What I'd tell anyone sitting in a version of that story right now is this: the cost of silence is always higher than the cost of the question. Always. You just don't see the bill until years later. Keep doing the work, keep sending the Christmas cards, metaphorically or literally. And trust that the truth, if you keep living it, will eventually walk into the room on its own.